Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome once again to Cracking Addiction, and we have with us the good Dr. Laura Petracek. Hello Laura, how are you?
Hi, Fergal. Good. How about yourself?
I'm very well too. So I thought we'd continue our discussion on the elements of DBT, and going back to that dime bar mnemonic, so distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, mindfulness, and emotional regulation. I thought, well, let's talk about distress tolerance. Now, when I consider distress tolerance, I think of it really as a group of those behavioral interventions that can immediately reduce distress, as opposed to taking a diazepam tablet. But I think you've got a different way of conceptualizing it, do you, Laura?
Well, that's the first category, Fergal. It's
Mm.
distress tolerance skills for a crisis.
Yeah.
So that's one group of distress tolerance for crisis survival skills. And the other group of distress tolerance is for average annoyances or everyday annoyances or frustrations or
Mm.
maybe anger. Yeah, but the
All
crisis survival skills are the more heavy duty distress tolerance skills. They're
right.
usually
Right.
immediate, they're usually more intense, not necessarily, but usually, and something that someone could kind of keep in their back pocket, so to speak.
Mm.
A client, especially if a client's really struggling and really dysregulating or struggles with suicidality. These skills are really important for a client such as that to have down, to really know these.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so this is one of the things that used to and still does amaze me. So I think we're going to talk about specific interventions for crisis management and the immediate reduction of distress in a crisis, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I have a number of colleagues and a number of patients who all seem to reach out for the diazepam to manage acute distress. And I have a problem with using diazepam for distress tolerance for a number of reasons. The least of the not the least of which is I mean, I read somewhere that the half-life of or the duration of distress, acute distress, is only 90 seconds.
Yeah.
If you can get through the first 90 seconds of whatever it is that's upsetting you, it gets
Mhm.
better after 90 seconds. So you've actually, instead of holding your breath for 10 seconds or counting to 10, you got to count to 90. But nonetheless, there is usually a finite endpoint to distress, right?
Correct.
And then when you consider that diazepam doesn't really get to its peak effect. So when I swallow a diazepam tablet, you might notice the beginnings of an effect, but you don't get the peak effect for diazepam for at least 90 minutes,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
on the
And
one
that's,
hand, you have
oh, go ahead.
so on the one hand you have acute distress lasting 90 seconds. Yeah, and you pop a Valium, pop a diazepam because you're distressed, but it
Right.
doesn't really kick in for at least 90 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. So the situation or incident has already passed,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And unfortunately, Fergal, we live in a very, addictive, not necessarily addictive. Well, we are an addictive society, but we grow up with, you just watch the ads on TV. You got a pain, take a pill. If you're
Yeah.
distressed, take Valium. If
Mm,
you're tired, drink 5 Red Bull. I mean,
yeah.
there's, so many medications. I mean, I literally, some clients, when they first come to see me, they're on a medication to wake up, to help them when they're stressed, to help them when they're tired. And it's like all day long until they go to bed.
Yeah.
They're not
And
even,
then they're on a medication to go to sleep.
yes. So like then they're
Yeah.
on,
So they're on an upper and a downer and they're all antagonistic.
yeah. And
Uh-huh.
it doesn't help it really affects their mental health in a negative way. And they're probably also on psychotropics, but I don't think they get the full advantage or positive effect being on so many other mood altering dependent drugs because
Yeah.
Valium is highly dependent. And, going back to the 90 seconds, um, there's Dr. Jill Bolte wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight, and
Yeah.
she had a stroke and, wrote this beautiful book and just talks about it. But she talked about that a feeling, the lifetime of a feeling or life, the time of a feeling is 90 seconds. She also, in her research, found the same thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have clients like, oh, if I start crying, I'll never stop. Well, let's just try an experiment, because
Yeah.
a lot of times clients don't even allow like a little
Yeah.
bit of feeling to come up because they're so afraid they have this in their mind. The feeling will go forever or a long time. And unfortunately, we're not used to feeling our feelings. So it probably
Mm.
does feel like an hour or something, even though it's only 90 seconds. Yeah, and I actually, in my presentations and in them doing therapy with clients, remind them it's only 90 seconds. That's the average lifespan of a feeling.
Yeah.
So if we could just get them through that, and
Yeah.
it's I don't think it's quite the same time, but I've read that the acuteness of feeling suicidal is actually very short.
Mm.
If we could just help a client get over that acuteness of suicidal feeling, that too shall pass. Not that they don't
Mm.
follow up help, but anyway, but that's
Yeah, we're not advocating in any way that anyone who's suicidal thinks that they can just sit it out, write it out without actually seeking professional help. Of course
oh
not.
yeah, no, no, no. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I didn't mean it like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, if someone's in that
Yeah.
crisis, it's maybe they could
Yeah.
remind themselves that. I don't know, but definitely for going back to the feelings, is
Yeah.
90 seconds. And again, we're so used to. I remember growing up. My dad worked for a pharmaceutical company, and there was like 100 different pills in our cabinets, one
Yeah.
for whatever was your problem of the day. And then on top of that, you have your cocktail or whatever. And so and
So what's the
that's,
definition of health then, Laura? You've just triggered a question in me. What's the definition of health? Do you have a definition?
well, I think a definition of health is being emotionally happy
Yeah.
overall. Um,
See, that's the psychologist speaking. Because my definition of health, going back to the medicine cabinet, is
oh,
is trifecta, the following three things, right? A
okay.
used pair of running shoes in the hallway, an
Oh,
empty medicine cabinet, and not knowing who your doctor is.
I like that. Okay, I see what you're saying. Well, my definition of health
Going
is
back to the medicine cabinet thing, you
okay.
know?
Yeah, we forget the medicine cabinet because that definitely was not a good situation for me or for a lot of people. But my, definition or what I use for health today is I live in a place where it's moderate temperature all year round. So I love jumping on my bicycle. I'm a avid cyclist. I went cycling last summer in Italy for 3 weeks. I just love cycling. Also love swimming. And this past weekend, I hadn't gotten my guitar out in a while. And I played guitar at this one event.
Yeah,
So spending time with friends. So yeah, there's a lot of positive things we could do instead of self-medicating. But it gets to be a habit, and it also is addictive. So that's also part of the problem when I have clients like throw everything away, and then a day later they get it out of the trash or they go to their doctor or something. So
yeah,
these drugs are highly addictive in a short amount of time.
yeah. So you mentioned earlier on that you classify distress into the kind of the hyperacute, acute stuff, and then the kind of the crappy long, as the day goes on stuff. Now, I have a mnemonic for you.
Okay.
I'm going to give you my mnemonic for the way that I recommend people to manage their own distress. But
Okay.
I'm wondering if the techniques that I'm going to describe now, how would they fit into your classification? And you
Okay.
must have heard of this. This is quite famous, apparently. But it's the TIPP mnemonic.
Oh, yeah.
TIPP. Have you
Oh,
heard of
yeah.
that one?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah,
right here, my crisis survival skills that I was going to
exactly.
talk about. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Oh,
then you
yeah.
tell me.
Well,
Well, let's.
that's a Dr. Linehan
Is
acronym.
that
You
it?
can't steal
All
that.
right. All
Well,
right.
no,
Okay.
no. I like the dime though. That's yours. You can copyright that one. I
All
already
right. So
I already
I'm not
changed
going to
my
be able to.
slides to include that one.
I'm not going to be able to claim anything for that then. So what does TIP stand for then?
So tip the T stands for temperature.
Yeah.
So for going through DBT training, um, they have this huge bowl, like for mixing, a mixing bowl in the front of the class, and they have ice and cold, then they put cold water in it, and then everyone has to go up and totally immerse their face in that water. And I'm telling
Yeah.
you, if that doesn't change how whatever temperature you're feeling, especially distress, anger, you name it, it's
All
gone.
right.
You're
So
thinking
why does that work? Do you know why that works?
because it physiologically lowers our blood pressure
Yes.
really fast.
Yes.
And it's like everything shuts down. And when we're in hyperarousal, our
Yeah.
face is flushed, we're breathing shallow, we're breathing fast,
Yeah.
our thoughts are going zzz, and our negative thoughts. So you put your head in that bowl of ice water, and then
Yeah.
physiologically everything goes down, and the thoughts are slowed
Mm.
down, the breathing is slower, everything is slowed down and you're more regulated at that point.
So the way that I explain it is that your body can only hold. Your body's got two general states of arousal. It's got the sympathetic hyperarousal and the parasympathetic relaxed state, and you cannot occupy both spaces at once.
Right.
And when we're hyper aroused, the sympathetic overdrive occurs where your sympathetic system stimulates your heart rate to beat faster, as you say, the breathing to be fast and shallow, and you to be angry and your muscles to be tensed and just as you would in the flight or fight response. So when you're hyper aroused, really, it's similar to the fight or flight response. So putting your face in the water stimulates changes in the neurological system of your body as it relates to the heart, and in particular, if you're really interested in it, it's the oculocardiac reflex, which then shifts you from the sympathetic system to the parasympathetic system and puts you into a state of relaxation. Because as I said, you cannot occupy two spaces at once. You can either be in the hyper-aroused space or the relaxed space, but you can't be both.
Yeah.
So this, how quickly do you reckon this change happens?
Oh, I'd say like that.
Like that. It's almost
That's why it's such
instantaneous, isn't it?
a useful
Yeah.
skill.
If you hold your breath underneath really ice cold water, it's almost instantaneous, right? Because the temperature it just hits the eyes, and
Hmm.
the breath holding, those two acts really, they augment the parasympathetic system. So that goes back to my point about, this is a behavioral intervention that can really calm you down and get you away from the hyper-aroused space literally within seconds. And
Yes.
given that the stress lasts 90 seconds, would you rather do that or would you rather have a pill that's going to take 90 minutes to really kick in? To me, it's a
Well,
no-brainer.
uh, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But again, our society pushes taking a pill, taking a drink more so than
Yeah,
putting your head in
yeah,
the water.
yeah.
One thing that
So what does the I stand for?
oh, well, before we get to the I,
All
um,
right,
just something
there's
else I
more.
use with kids is they have this instant ice pack that you
Yeah,
break it and it gets instantly cold. So a lot of teenagers or middle school kids I work with, I order these by the bulk from Amazon and I give them a few and tell them to keep it in their backpack. So if they're having a tough day at school, they can't go put their head in a thing of water, a bowl of water. So they could either take it out right then and crack it open, just bend it, and then their hands are cold and it helps that physiological response. Not as intensely as a bowl of ice cold water with ice cubes, or they can go in the bathroom and crack it. But, and some people, I tell them put one in their glove compartment or in their purse. So something that's really easily accessible and is more just easier to get to, because that bowl of ice water, unless you're sitting at home, is not that easy. It's almost impossible to get to. So I try to find things that are more accessible in the moment for people in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
But so I
What does I stand for?
I stands for intense exercise. So I don't know
Yeah,
how fast
yeah.
you jog when you jog, or if you're a runner.
Do I look as if I jog intensely or fast? Thank you, Laura.
Well, even jogging, but walking is great exercise, but intense
Yeah,
exercise has to get your heart rate up. And so I have one of these fancy Garmin watches, and it
yeah,
will tell me if I'm getting up there into that intense zone. And so that usually means, something, heavy cardio. So running, even jogging is okay. For me, cycling
yeah,
up hills, swimming fast or as fast as I can. Could be dancing, could be Zumba. Could be boxing. There's a lot of different intense exercises. It could be, even if it's floor exercises, like doing burpees,
yeah.
do 10 minutes of 5 minutes of burpees, and you're
You're
definitely going to be in
exhausted.
a different state of
Yeah,
mind. So, the intense
yeah.
exercise, yeah, that really helps.
That reminds me of high intensity interval training, which I actually sometimes do. And really, I think it's important to understand it doesn't matter what the exercise is per se. What matters is to actually get your heart rate to over or approaching around about 90% of maximal heart rate.
Yes.
And then so then people say to me, well, what's maximal heart rate? Well, the good old number was 220 minus your age. So that would be roughly 100% of your maximal heart rate. And if you can get your heart rate to about 90% of that, that's and you can do that for 30-second bursts. That's high intensity interval training. And so I recommend that kind of exercise to people who are trying to get the eye for intense exercise. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be, of an intensity, a short burst to basically effectively use up the adrenaline rush. Because remember
Yes.
that the T for temperature was all about suppressing the adrenaline rush.
Right.
The
Yes.
I for intense exercise is all about burning up that excess energy. I mean, that's not a physiological explanation. So for the physiologists out there, I'm sorry, but that's how I conceptualize the difference between the T and the
No,
I
that's a
in
good
in
point.
in TIPP.
I have never actually heard it stated that way, but that makes perfect sense,
Well,
though.
that's why we're chatting, isn't it?
And it's interesting going back to the HIIT. So we have this, there's different gyms all over the world, but this particular gym is called Orange Theory. And so I belong to it. And you wear a monitor when you go there, and then they have these screens all around, and you could see when you get to the 90%, when you get to that hit rate. So it helps you,
Yeah,
like you're slacking, you got to get rolling there. And
yeah,
I don't know, I find that really helpful, because on my own, I don't quite know if I'm
yeah.
hitting it or not.
Well,
But
I mean, what you're saying is that you like that immediate feedback. So, I mean, I used to have a Garmin watch, or I used to have an Apple Watch as well, and it would tell me the whole point was it would give you the feedback of how active you were during the day. But the feedback that I consistently got was, well, I'm a lazy fat bastard, so I stopped wearing the watch. So feedback's not always necessarily good.
okay. Well, but like you said, it doesn't have to be long. So
Yeah,
even if, like, I actually try, so it's a 50-minute session for clients, I try to do like 5 minutes of HIIT in between
yeah,
clients. Like, and
yeah,
usually it's a
yeah.
burpee
That's
thing,
great.
but I'm telling
Yeah,
you, what a difference that
yeah,
makes. I used
yeah,
to just like step outside, walk a little bit. No, this
yeah,
is a game changer. Yeah.
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 So I think, Laura, we've run out of time again, but what I'd like to do, if you're happy to join me again, we'll have another conversation about the rest of the tip mnemonic, if that's all right
Uh,
with you.
Yeah, I would love to.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.